My parents told me to move out on Christmas morning. The suitcase was already hidden under my bed. The boxes were packed and taped shut in my closet. I'd been planning my escape for months, knowing this day would come. But when my mother's voice cut through the Christmas morning silence like a knife, telling me I had to leave, I wasn't prepared for how much it would still hurt. What happens when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally make you feel like a burden? When Christmas morning becomes the day they choose to throw you away? If you've ever felt abandoned by the people who matter most, please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story, it's going to show you that sometimes the family that hurts you the most isn't the one you're born into. And I need you to hear this. I need you to comment below and tell me I'm not crazy for what I'm about to share. It started 3 years ago when my younger sister Emma came back from college for Christmas break. I was 22, working 2 jobs, and still living at home while I saved money for my own place. The plan was always temporary, just until I could get on my feet. My parents had been supportive, or so I thought, but Emma had always been the golden child. She was 3 years younger than me, studying pre-med at an expensive private university, and somehow she'd never worked a day in her life. While I was juggling shifts at a coffee shop and a retail store, she was getting her tuition, room and board, car payments, and spending money all paid for by our parents. I didn't mind. I really didn't. I was proud of my sister for being smart and driven. I figured we were just different people with different paths. I was the practical one, the independent one. She was the academic star. There was room for both of us in this family, or so I thought. That Christmas 3 years ago, Emma came home with her boyfriend Jake. He was this clean-cut, wealthy guy whose family owned some kind of tech company. The kind of guy who wore expensive clothes but tried to look casual, you know? Designer jeans and sneakers that cost more than I made in a week. I liked Jake well enough at first. He was polite, helped with dishes, brought nice wine for dinner. But there was something about the way my parents looked at him. Like they were seeing their future son-in-law, the successful man who would take care of their precious daughter and give them the kind of lifestyle they dreamed of. And then there was the way they looked at me. I'd been dating Marcus for about 6 months at that point. He was a mechanic, worked with his hands, had tattoos covering his forearms. He was kind, funny, and treated me like I was the most important person in the world. But he didn't come from money. He didn't have a college degree. And when I brought him home for Christmas dinner that year, the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. My dad barely spoke to him. My mom kept asking pointed questions about his prospects and his plans for the future. Emma and Jake exchanged these little looks across the table, like they were witnessing something embarrassing. But it was after Marcus left that night that everything really started to fall apart. "Amber, we need to talk," my mom said, settling into the living room with my dad flanking her like they were about to stage an intervention. "Is this about Marcus?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Honey," my mom started, using that tone she always used when she was about to say something that would hurt, but she wanted me to think it was for my own good. "We're just concerned about the choices you're making." "What choices?" My dad leaned forward. "You're 22 years old. You should be thinking about your future, about building something meaningful with someone who can provide for you. Marcus works hard. He makes good money. As a mechanic," my mom said, like the word tasted bad in her mouth. "Amber, you could do so much better. You're a smart, beautiful girl. You could find someone like Jake." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Someone like Jake? Someone with ambition. Someone with a future. Someone who comes from a good family. The way she said good family made it clear what she really meant. Someone with money. Someone who fit their idea of what successful looked like. "Marcus comes from a good family," I said quietly. "His parents are wonderful people." "I'm sure they are," my dad said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about your future, about the kind of life you want to build." "I want to build a life with someone who loves me," I said, my voice getting stronger. "Someone who treats me with respect and makes me laugh and supports my dreams." And what dreams are those? My mom asked. Working retail forever? Never going to college? Never making something of yourself? The words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I am making something of myself. I'm working hard. I'm saving money. I'm being responsible. You're wasting your potential, my dad said. And frankly, we're starting to worry that having you here, comfortable and supported, isn't motivating you to grow. That's when I knew. They weren't just disapproving of Marcus. They were disapproving of me, of the life I was choosing, of the person I was becoming. In their eyes, I wasn't the successful daughter. I was the disappointment. But I stayed. I told myself it would get better. I told myself they just needed time to see Marcus for who he really was, to understand that success wasn't just about money and status. I convinced myself that this was just typical parent worry, that they'd come around. I was so naive. Over the next year, things got progressively worse. Every conversation became a subtle dig about my life choices. My mom would make comments about how Emma was doing at school, how proud they were of her grades, her boyfriend, her future prospects. And then she'd ask me about my plans, with that same disappointed tone. My dad started charging me rent, which was fair. I was an adult living in their house. But he charged me market rate for my tiny childhood bedroom, while Emma got to stay for free during breaks because she was investing in her education. They started having dinner parties and social events where Emma and Jake were always invited, always introduced with pride. This is our daughter Emma. She's studying to be a doctor. And this is her boyfriend Jake. He works in tech. When people asked about me, the introduction was always much shorter. This is our other daughter, Amber, our other daughter. Like I was an afterthought, like I was something they had to explain rather than celebrate. Marcus noticed it too. He started declining invitations to family events because he could feel the tension, the judgment. And I didn't blame him. Who wants to spend time with people who look at you like you're not good enough for their daughter? But it hurt. It hurt to see the man I loved being treated like he was somehow beneath us. It hurt to see my parents welcome Jake with open arms while barely tolerating the person who made me happiest. And it really hurt when Emma started joining in. It was subtle at first. Little comments about how Jake's family had this beautiful house, how they were planning this amazing vacation, how Jake was already thinking about buying Emma a ring. She'd post these pictures on social media of fancy dinners and weekend trips, always with the caption about how blessed she was and how grateful she was for her amazing man. Meanwhile, Marcus and I were happy with movie nights at home and walks in the park and cooking dinner together in my parents' kitchen. We didn't need expensive restaurants or exotic vacations. We had each other, and that felt like enough. But apparently, it wasn't enough for my family. Last Christmas, things reached a breaking point. Emma came home engaged. Jake had proposed with this massive ring that probably cost more than I made in a year. My parents were over the moon, immediately starting to plan an elaborate wedding, talking about venues and guest lists and how proud they were, and I was genuinely happy for them. I was. Emma deserved to be loved, and if Jake made her happy, then I was glad. But the way my parents acted, like Emma's engagement was the greatest achievement in our family's history, while my relationship with Marcus was treated like some kind of phase I needed to grow out of. It stung. The final straw came during Christmas dinner. We were all sitting around the table, and my dad raised his glass for a toast. To Emma and Jake, he said, beaming. To their bright future together, and to the beautiful family they're going to build. We couldn't be more proud of the woman Emma has become and the choice she's made in her partner. The choice she's made in her partner. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone knew what he wasn't saying. Everyone knew he wasn't proud of the choice I'd made in my partner. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table, probably sensing that I was about to lose it. But I held it together. I raised my glass and smiled, and pretended like those words hadn't just shredded what was left of my relationship with my father. But after dinner, when we were cleaning up, my mom pulled me aside. I know that was hard to hear, she said quietly. But maybe it's time you started thinking about what you really want. I know what I want, I said. I want Marcus. She sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. Amber, you're 24 years old. You can't live in this house forever, working dead-end jobs and dating someone who's never going to be able to give you the life you deserve. What if this is the life I deserve? What if I'm happy? Are you happy? She asked. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're stuck. It looks like you're afraid to take risks, to push yourself, to expect more from life. I stared at her, feeling something break inside my chest. You want me to leave. I want you to grow up, she said. I want you to stop settling for less than you're worth. But what she didn't understand, what she'd never understood, was that Marcus wasn't settling. Marcus was choosing. Every single day he chose me. He chose to love me, to support me, to build a life with me. He didn't stay with me because I was convenient or because he couldn't do better. He stayed because he wanted to be with me. My parents had never looked at our relationship that way. They'd never seen Marcus as someone who was choosing me. They only saw him as someone I was settling for. That night I made a decision. I started researching apartments, looking at rental listings, figuring out how much I could afford on my own. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I was starting to realize I might not have a choice. I also started saving every penny I could. I picked up extra shifts, cut back on expenses, and slowly built up enough money for a security deposit and first month's rent. Just in case. Marcus and I talked about moving in together, but we both wanted to make sure we were ready. We'd been together for 2 years at that point, and we knew we wanted a future together. But we also knew that living together was a big step, and we wanted to do it right. But as the months went by, it became clearer and clearer that my time at home was limited. My parents weren't just disapproving of my choices anymore. They were actively trying to sabotage my relationship. My mom would accidentally schedule family events on nights when Marcus and I had plans. My dad would make comments about how the house was feeling crowded and how nice it would be to have more space. Emma would visit with Jake and they'd take over the living room, making it clear that this was their space, their family home, and I was just a temporary resident. The breaking point came in November. Marcus and I had been talking seriously about moving in together after the holidays. We'd found a cute little apartment about 20 minutes away. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. We were planning to sign the lease in January, but then my parents found out. I don't know how they knew. Maybe Emma overheard a phone conversation, or maybe they saw me looking at apartment listings on my laptop. But somehow they figured out that Marcus and I were planning to move in together, and they lost their minds. You're making a huge mistake, my dad said when they confronted me about it. You're throwing your life away for some guy who's never going to marry you. How do you know he's never going to marry me? Because men like him don't marry women like you, my mom said, and the cruelty in her voice took my breath away. They string you along for as long as it's convenient, and then they move on to someone else. You don't know Marcus, I said, my voice shaking. You've never even tried to get to know him. We know enough, my dad said, and we're not going to stand by and watch you ruin your future. That's when they gave me the ultimatum. If you move in with that boy, my mom said, you're not welcome here anymore. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I stared at them, waiting for one of them to take it back, to say they didn't mean it. But they both just looked at me with this cold determination, like they were drawing a line in the sand. You're disowning me? I asked quietly. We're trying to save you from yourself, my dad said. If you want to throw your life away, you're not going to do it under our roof. I should have left that night. I should have packed my bags and walked out the door and never looked back. But some part of me still hoped they'd come to their senses. Some part of me still believed that their love for me was stronger than their disapproval of my choices. So I stayed. I canceled the apartment. I told Marcus we needed to wait a little longer, just until things settled down with my family. He was disappointed, but he understood. He'd seen how my parents treated him, how they treated me. He knew this wasn't easy, but staying was the worst decision I could have made. Because it gave my parents 3 more months to make my life miserable. 3 more months of passive-aggressive comments and disappointed sighs and not so subtle hints that I was a burden, a failure, a disappointment. And then came this morning. Christmas morning. The morning that was supposed to be about family and love and togetherness. The morning my parents decided to throw me away. I was in my room, still in my pajamas, when I heard the knock on my door. It was barely 8 in the morning, way too early for Christmas morning festivities. But there they were, both of them, standing in my doorway with expressions I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something worse. Resignation. "Amber," my mom said, her voice flat and emotionless, "we need to talk." And that's when she said the words that changed everything. The words that made me realize I'd been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. The words that made me grateful I'd already packed those boxes, already hidden that suitcase under my bed. "We think it's time for you to move out." On Christmas morning. They chose Christmas morning to tell me I was no longer welcome in the home where I grew up. The home where I'd celebrated 24 previous Christmases. The home where I thought I'd always have a place, no matter what. But here's the thing they didn't know. Here's the secret I'd been keeping for the past month, ever since our last fight about Marcus and my future and my mistakes. I was ready to go, and what happened next? What I found out about why they really wanted me gone. It's going to change everything you think you know about this story, because it wasn't really about Marcus. It wasn't about my job or my future or my potential. It was about money and jealousy, and a secret that would tear our family apart forever. Let me tell you exactly what happened next. When my mom said those words, "We think it's time for you to move out," I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't ask them why they were doing this to me on Christmas morning of all days. Instead, I looked them both in the eye and said, "Okay, when do you want me gone?" The shock on their faces was almost worth the pain in my chest. They'd been expecting tears, protests, maybe even anger. They'd been prepared for me to fight them, to make this harder than it had to be. They weren't prepared for acceptance. "Well," my dad stammered, clearly thrown off by my response. "We were thinking, maybe after the holidays, give you some time to find a place." "No need," I said, walking over to my closet and pulling out the boxes I'd hidden there. "I've been ready for this conversation for a while now." You should have seen their faces when I started pulling out box after box of my belongings, all neatly packed and labeled. Books, clothes, photo albums, everything that mattered to me was already organized and ready to go. "Amber," my mom said, her voice cracking slightly. "What? How long have you been planning this?" "Since November," I said honestly. "Since you made it clear that loving Marcus was a deal breaker for having a relationship with this family." My dad's face went red. "This isn't about Marcus, isn't it?" I pulled my suitcase out from under the bed, the one I'd packed 3 days ago when I overheard them talking in the kitchen about how something had to be done, about my situation. "Because from where I'm standing, everything changed the moment I brought home someone you didn't approve of." "We just want what's best for you," my mom said, but her voice sounded hollow now, like she was saying words she'd rehearsed but didn't really believe. "No," I said, standing up and facing them both. "You want what looks best for you. You want a daughter who makes you look good at dinner parties. You want someone you can brag about to your friends. And I'm not that person." The silence that followed was deafening, because we all knew it was true. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. "We'll help you move your things to the car." "Already taken care of," I said. "Marcus is on his way," another shock. They probably thought I'd be calling them, crying and desperate, asking for help even after they'd thrown me out. But I'd learned a long time ago not to depend on people who saw me as a burden. 20 minutes later, Marcus's truck pulled into the driveway. I watched from my bedroom window as he got out, his face grim but determined. He'd been expecting this day, too. We both had. "You don't have to do this alone," he'd told me last week when I'd finally admitted what I thought was coming. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." And that's the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose. Marcus didn't care that I came with drama and disappointed parents and a complicated situation. He just cared about me. I carried the first box downstairs, and there was Emma, standing in the living room in her expensive pajamas, watching everything unfold like it was some kind of entertainment. "Really, Amber?" she said. "You're going to make a scene on Christmas morning?" I set the box down and looked at my sister. Really looked at her. This girl who I'd defended my whole life, who I'd been proud of, who I'd never seen as competition until she started treating me like I was beneath her. "I'm not making a scene," I said quietly. "I'm just leaving." "Good," she said, and the casual cruelty in that one word hit me like a physical blow. Maybe now Mom and Dad can finally have some peace. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. Emma wasn't just complicit in my parents' treatment of me. She was actively encouraging it. "Why do you hate me so much?" I asked her, genuinely curious. "What did I ever do to you?" She laughed, but it wasn't a nice sound. "You really don't know, do you? You really don't see how your whole situation reflects on the rest of us." My situation? The dead-end jobs, the loser boyfriend, the complete lack of ambition. Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell people that my sister works in retail and dates a mechanic? Do you know what that says about our family? I stared at her, feeling like I was seeing a stranger. "When did you become such a snob, Emma?" "When I realized that the people you associate with and the choices you make affect how people see all of us. Jake's family has money, Amber, real money, and they're not going to want their son marrying into a family where—" She gestured vaguely at me. "Where this is considered acceptable." And there it was. The real reason they wanted me gone. It wasn't about my happiness or my future or what was best for me. It was about Emma's relationship and how my existence might complicate her path to the wealthy, prestigious life she wanted. Marcus appeared in the doorway, and I saw Emma's expression change. She looked at him like he was something distasteful she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "Hey," he said softly, looking between me and Emma. "Ready to go?" I nodded, picking up my box. But Emma wasn't done yet. "You know," she said, following us toward the door, "Jake's father owns a construction company. He said he might have an opening for someone with Marcus's skills, manual labor, you know. If you're interested." The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. She was offering Marcus a job like she was doing us some huge favor, like we should be grateful for her charity. But Marcus just smiled. "Thanks, but I'm good. Actually just got promoted to shop manager at the place I work, and I'm thinking about opening my own garage in a few years." Emma's smile faltered. She hadn't expected him to have ambitions, goals, a future planned out. In her mind, people like Marcus were supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps people like her threw them. "Oh," she said. "That's nice." We loaded the truck in silence, my parents hovering awkwardly in the background but not helping. Not saying goodbye. Not acknowledging that their daughter was leaving home forever. But as I was putting the last box in the truck bed, my mom appeared beside me. "Amber," she said quietly. "You know we love you, right?" I turned to look at her, this woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and tucked me in at night for years. And I tried to find some trace of that mother in the stranger standing in front of me. "Do you?" I asked. "Because love isn't supposed to come with conditions. Love isn't supposed to depend on whether I make choices you approve of." "We just wanted more for you," she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "You wanted different for me," I corrected. "There's a difference." She reached out like she was going to hug me, but I stepped back. "I couldn't. Not after everything. Maybe someday," I said. "When you figure out how to love me for who I am instead of hating me for who I'm not." And then I got in the truck with Marcus, and we drove away from the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to walk and talk and dream, away from the people who were supposed to love me no matter what. But here's what I didn't know as we drove away. Here's the part of the story that I wouldn't discover until weeks later, when everything I thought I knew about my family would be turned upside down. My parents weren't just ashamed of me. They weren't just disappointed in my choices. They were scared. Scared of what I might find out if I stuck around too long. Scared of what I might discover about the real reason Emma's education was being paid for, and Jake's family business, and why my parents were so desperate to keep me away from certain conversations. You see, 3 days after I moved out, I got a phone call that changed everything. A phone call from my grandmother, my dad's mother, who lived across the country and who I hadn't spoken to in months. "Amber, honey," she said, her voice shaky and urgent. "I just heard about what happened. About your parents making you leave." "News travels fast," I said, not really wanting to rehash the whole painful story. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something your parents should have told you a long time ago. About the money for Emma's school. About why they've been so different these past few years." My blood went cold. "What about the money?" "It's not their money, Amber. It never was." That's when she told me about the trust fund. The trust fund that our grandfather, her late husband, had set up for both Emma and me before he died. Equal amounts, $50,000 each, meant to be used for education or starting a business or buying a house. Whatever we needed to build our futures, the trust fund that I'd never heard about. The trust fund that was supposed to be split between us but that Emma had been using for her entire college education while I worked 2 jobs and lived paycheck to paycheck. "I don't understand," I said, my hands shaking as I held the phone. "If there was money for both of us, why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because," my grandmother said, her voice heavy with sadness, "your parents decided you weren't responsible enough to handle it. They said you were making poor choices, dating the wrong people, not taking your life seriously. They convinced the executor, your Uncle Jim, that the money should all go to Emma instead." I felt like the world was tilting sideways. "They stole my inheritance?" "They redirected it," she said carefully. "Legally, they had the right to do it since you were both minors when the trust was established. But morally, Amber, your grandfather wanted that money to help both of his granddaughters. He would be heartbroken to know what happened. $50,000. Money that was meant to be mine. Money that could have changed everything. I could have gone to college. I could have started a business. I could have had choices that I'd never even known existed. Instead, it all went to Emma, to pay for her prestigious education, her expensive lifestyle, her perfect life that my parents loved to brag about. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why they'd been so determined to get rid of me. Why they'd been so critical of my choices, so dismissive of my relationship with Marcus. Why Emma had been so cruel, so confident that she was better than me. They'd built her life on the foundation of my stolen inheritance, and they couldn't afford to have me around asking questions about money, about college funds, about why Emma got everything while I got nothing. "Grandma," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what can I do about this?" "I don't know, honey," she said. "But I think you deserve to know the truth. I think you deserve to know that your grandfather didn't forget about you, that he wanted you to have the same opportunities as Emma." After I hung up the phone, I sat in the living room of the little apartment Marcus and I had finally rented together, staring at the wall and trying to process what I'd just learned. My parents hadn't just kicked me out because they were disappointed in my choices. They'd kicked me out to cover up the fact that they'd stolen my future and given it to my sister. Marcus found me there an hour later, still sitting in the same spot, still trying to wrap my head around the betrayal. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting beside me and taking my hand, so I told him everything. About the trust fund, about the money, about the fact that my entire family had been lying to me for years. About how Emma's perfect life had been built on what should have been mine. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" he asked finally. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Part of me wants to march over there right now and confront them. Demand answers. Demand what's rightfully mine. And the other part? The other part wonders if they're even worth fighting for anymore. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt in the moment. It makes you question everything you thought you knew. Every memory, every conversation, every moment of love or support or family togetherness becomes suspect. How much of it was real, and how much was guilt over what they'd done to me? But as I sat there in our little apartment, Marcus's hand in mine, surrounded by the boxes of belongings I'd packed myself because I'd known this day was coming, I realized something important. They'd taken my money. They'd taken my inheritance, my opportunities, my trust, but they hadn't taken my future. I'd built something real with Marcus. Something honest and true and not based on anyone else's expectations or money or status. I'd learned to work hard, to be independent, to survive on my own terms. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than $50,000 could ever buy. But I still wanted my money back. And I still wanted them to face the consequences of what they'd done, because this story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And what happened when I finally confronted them with what I knew? When I walked back into that house with proof of their lies and demanded the truth? That's when this family drama became something none of us were prepared for. Something that would destroy relationships, reveal more secrets, and change all of our lives forever. But you'll have to wait to hear about that. I spent 3 weeks planning my confrontation. 3 weeks researching trust fund laws, gathering evidence, and preparing for the conversation that would either get me justice or destroy what was left of my relationship with my family forever. My grandmother had sent me copies of the original trust documents, my grandfather's will, and bank statements showing where the money had gone. Everything was there in black and white. The theft, the lies, the systematic betrayal that had shaped my entire adult life. But I needed more than just papers. I needed a strategy. Marcus thought I should get a lawyer first, make it official. "They stole from you, Amber," he kept saying. "This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is fraud." And he was right. Legally, I had a case. But I wanted to give them one chance to make it right before I destroyed them completely. One chance to explain, to apologize, to return what they'd taken. I was probably being naive. After everything they'd done, I should have just sued them and been done with it. But some part of me still hoped that underneath all the lies and manipulation, there was still a family worth saving. I should have known better. The plan was simple. I would show up at the house on a Saturday afternoon when I knew they'd all be there. My parents always did their weekly meal prep together, and Emma usually came over with Jake to do laundry and raid the refrigerator. I'd present the evidence calmly, give them a chance to explain, and see if we could work something out. What I wasn't prepared for was walking into the middle of something that would make the trust fund theft look like a minor betrayal. Used my key. They hadn't thought to ask for it back when they kicked me out. And let myself into the house around 2 in the afternoon. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. Multiple conversations overlapping in that chaotic way that happens when families gather. But as I got closer, I realized they weren't just chatting about weekend plans or arguing about what to watch on TV. They were talking about me. "I still think we should have handled it differently," my mom was saying, her voice stressed and guilty. "Just kicking her out like that on Christmas morning? It feels wrong." "We didn't have a choice," my dad replied, and I could hear him pacing. She was getting too close to figuring things out. "All those questions about college funds and why Emma gets everything paid for?" "But she's our daughter," my mom protested weakly. "So is Emma," Jake's voice cut in, and I felt a chill run down my spine. And Emma's future is what matters here. We can't let Amber's drama jeopardize everything we've worked for. Like he was already part of the family. Like he had a say in what happened to me. "The trust fund money is almost gone anyway," Emma said dismissively. "I'll graduate in May, and then it won't matter what Amber knows or doesn't know." "But what if she finds out?" my mom asked. "What if someone tells her?" "Who's going to tell her?" my dad said. "Your mother is the only one who knows, and she's not going to cause problems. Jim handled everything legally. There's no paper trail leading back to us. No paper trail." That's what they thought. I stepped into the kitchen doorway, holding the manila folder containing all the evidence my grandmother had sent me. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through their conversation like a blade, "there's a pretty clear paper trail." The silence that followed was deafening. 4 faces turned toward me with identical expressions of shock and terror. Like they'd just seen a ghost, or like they'd been caught red-handed. "Amber," my mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," I said, walking into the kitchen and setting the folder on the counter. "About the $50,000 you stole from me," My dad's face went pale. Emma grabbed Jake's arm like she was trying to steady herself. But it was my mom's reaction that really told me everything I needed to know. She started crying, not the manipulative tears she'd used when they kicked me out. Real tears, the kind that come from years of guilt and shame finally catching up with you. How did you find out? My dad asked quietly. Does it matter? I opened the folder and spread the documents across the kitchen counter. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Jake stepped forward, and I saw something in his expression that I'd never noticed before. A coldness, a calculation that made my skin crawl. Amber, he said, using that smooth diplomatic tone that probably worked great in business meetings. I think there might be a misunderstanding here. Really? I picked up the bank statements. Because these records show $50,000 from my grandfather's trust being transferred directly into an account used to pay Emma's tuition. What exactly am I misunderstanding? The legal process, he said. Your parents made a decision based on what they thought was best for the family. That's not theft. That's parenting. I stared at him, feeling a rage building in my chest that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Parenting? I said. Parenting is stealing your child's inheritance and lying about it for years? It wasn't stolen, Emma said, finally finding her voice. It was redirected to someone who could actually use it responsibly. Responsibly? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean to pay for your overpriced education so you could marry a rich boy and never have to work for anything in your life? That's not fair, Emma said, her cheeks flushing. I worked hard in school. I earned good grades. With my money, I shot back. Money that was meant for both of us. Money that could have paid for my education, my future, my choices. But instead, you got everything, and I got lectured about how I wasn't living up to my potential. You weren't, my dad said, and the casual cruelty in his voice took my breath away. You were working dead-end jobs, dating some mechanic, showing no ambition whatsoever. What were we supposed to do? Hand you $50,000 to waste. It wasn't your decision to make, I said, my voice shaking with anger. That money was mine. Grandfather left it for me specifically. Your grandfather left it for his granddaughter's futures, my mom said, wiping her eyes. And we made the decision that Emma had a better future ahead of her. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. This wasn't just about the money. This wasn't even just about favoritism or disappointment. They genuinely believed that I was worth less than Emma. They looked at their two daughters and decided that one of us deserved a future and the other one didn't. You never even gave me a chance, I said quietly. You never told me the money existed. You never let me know I had options. You just decided I wasn't worth investing in and gave everything to her. We gave you a home, my dad said defensively. We supported you. We fed you. We kept you safe. The bare minimum, I said. While Emma got the inheritance, the college fund, the support for her dreams, and a family that believed in her future. Jake cleared his throat. Look, Amber, I understand you're upset. But what's done is done. Emma's education is almost finished. She's going to have a great career, and she'll be able to contribute to the family in ways that... He paused, clearly trying to find a diplomatic way to say what he really meant. In ways that I can't? I finished for him. Is that what you were going to say? I was going to say in ways that will benefit everyone, he said smoothly. Emma's going to be a doctor. She'll make good money, have status in the community, be able to take care of your parents when they get older. The investment in her education will pay dividends for the whole family. And what about me? I asked. What am I supposed to do? Just accept that I'll never have those opportunities because you all decided I wasn't worth the investment. You could have made different choices, Emma said, and I could hear the superiority in her voice. You could have tried harder in high school, applied for scholarships, chosen a better career path. Instead, you chose to settle. I chose to work, I said. I chose to be independent. I chose to build a life with someone who actually loves me for who I am, not for what I might become or how much money I might make. And look where that got you, my dad said. 24 years old with no degree, no prospects, and no future. The words hit me like physical blows. Because even though I knew better, even though I'd built a life I was proud of with Marcus, some part of me still believed them. Some part of me still thought maybe I was the failure. Maybe I was the disappointment. Maybe I deserved less than Emma. But then I remembered Marcus's promotion. I remembered the plans he'd shared with me about opening his own garage. I remembered the way he looked at me like I was the most important person in his world. I remembered the little apartment we'd made into a home together, filled with love and laughter and hope for the future. And I remembered that my worth wasn't determined by these people who'd spent years tearing me down to build Emma up. "You're right," I said finally. "Look where my choices got me. I have a job I'm good at. I have a man who loves me unconditionally. I have a home where I'm wanted and valued. I have a life that's honest and real and built on actual love instead of money and status." I picked up the documents from the counter. "And now I'm going to have my inheritance back." My dad stepped forward. "Amber, be reasonable. The money's been spent. Emma's tuition, her living expenses, her books and supplies. It's gone." "Then you'll find a way to replace it," I said calmly. "Take out a loan. Sell something. Figure it out. But I want my $50,000 and I want it within 90 days. Or what?" Jake asked, and I could hear the challenge in his voice. "Or I take this evidence to a lawyer and we settle it in court," I said, "along with a lawsuit for emotional damages, fraud, and whatever else my attorney can come up with." The room went dead silent. They were all staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "You wouldn't," Emma said finally. "Try me." "Amber," my mom said desperately, "please, we're family. We can work this out without lawyers and courts and all that ugliness." "Family," I repeated. "Is that what you call what we are? Because families don't steal from each other. Families don't lie to each other for years. Families don't kick each other out on Christmas morning to cover up their crimes." "It wasn't a crime," my dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Taking someone's inheritance without their knowledge or consent? I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it is." Jake stepped forward again, and this time I could see the real him underneath all that polished charm. Cold, calculating, ruthless. "You know," he said, "if you pursue this legally, it's going to come out that your grandfather's trust was managed by your Uncle Jim. Jim, who's been handling your family's finances for years. Jim, who signed off on all the transfers. Are you really prepared to destroy his reputation too? His business? His family's livelihood?" It was a threat. Subtle, wrapped up in concern for Uncle Jim, but a threat nonetheless. They were telling me that if I fought back, I wouldn't just be hurting my parents and Emma. I'd be collateral damage spreading through the whole family. But I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. I'd learned that people who are willing to threaten you to keep their secrets are the same people who will never change, never apologize, never make things right. "Uncle Jim should have thought about that before he helped you steal from me," I said. "If his business gets hurt because people find out he mismanaged trust funds, that's on him, not me." "You're being incredibly selfish," Emma said. "This affects more people than just you." "Selfish?" I stared at her. "I'm being selfish for wanting the inheritance my grandfather left me. While you spent 4 years living off that money without a care in the world? While you built your entire future on what was stolen from me?" "I didn't know," she said, but I could see the lie in her eyes. "You knew," I said quietly. "Maybe not at first, but you figured it out. You knew why you got everything handed to you while I had to work for every penny. You knew and you didn't care." The silence stretched between us, filled with years of resentment and lies and betrayal. Finally, my mom spoke up. "What do you want from us, Amber? What would it take to resolve this without destroying the family?" "I want my money," I said. "I want a written apology, and I want all of you to stay out of my life until you can learn to treat me like I matter." "That's it?" my dad asked, and I could hear the relief in his voice. Like he'd been expecting something worse. "That's it? And if we do that, you won't go to the police? You won't sue us?" I considered the question. Part of me wanted to make them pay for everything they'd done. Not just the money, but the years of emotional abuse. the manipulation, the systematic destruction of my self-worth. But another part of me just wanted to be free of them. I wanted to take my inheritance and build something beautiful with Marcus and never have to think about their toxicity again. If you return my money and leave me alone, I'll consider us even, I said. Relief flooded their faces. Even Jake looked less tense. But then Emma spoke up. "There's just one problem," she said, and something in her voice made my blood run cold. "What problem?" She exchanged a look with Jake, like they were having a silent conversation. "The money isn't just gone," she said slowly. "It's complicated." "What do you mean complicated?" Jake cleared his throat. "Some of Emma's expenses were investments in our future together. Things that can't exactly be returned." My stomach dropped. "What kind of investments?" "The engagement ring," Emma said quietly. "Part of the down payment on the house we're buying. Some investments in Jake's family business that we made together." "You used my inheritance to invest in Jake's family company?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It made sense," Jake said defensively. "It was a good opportunity, and Emma was going to be part of the family business eventually anyway." I felt like the room was spinning. Not only had they stolen my money, they'd used it to further entwine Emma's future with Jake's family. They'd used my inheritance to buy Emma a place in his wealthy world. "How much?" I asked. "How much what?" "How much of my money went to Jake's family business?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. "All of it," I said, understanding flooding through me. "All of it went to Jake, didn't it? The tuition was just a cover story. You gave my entire inheritance to your boyfriend's family to secure your place with them." Emma's face crumpled. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." "Jake's family offered Emma a partnership in their company," my dad said. "It was an incredible opportunity, but it required an investment, a buy-in to show she was serious about her commitment to their family business. So you used my money to buy her a job with her boyfriend's rich family." "It's not just a job," Jake said. "It's a future, a legacy. Emma will be part of a multi-million-dollar company, built on my stolen inheritance." The words hung in the air like an accusation. And suddenly I realized this wasn't just about favoritism or disappointment, or even greed. This was about something much darker. This was about selling one daughter's future to secure the other daughter's place in a wealthy family. This was about my parents deciding that Emma's marriage into money was worth destroying me completely. And the worst part? I was pretty sure Jake had orchestrated the whole thing. "This was your idea, wasn't it?" I said, looking at Jake. "You're the one who suggested using my trust fund." "Simply pointed out the opportunities available," he said, smoothly. "You manipulated my family into stealing from me so your girlfriend could buy her way into your family business. I provided a solution to a complex situation," he said. "Your parents wanted Emma to have the best possible future. I offered a way to make that happen. By destroying mine. By redirecting resources toward the person who could make the best use of them." The casual callousness of it took my breath away. To him, I wasn't even a person. I was just a resource allocation problem that needed to be solved. That's when I realized I'd been thinking about this all wrong. I'd been focused on getting my money back, on making them apologize, on trying to salvage some kind of relationship with my family. But this wasn't about money anymore. This was about something much bigger. This was about Jake systematically destroying my family to get what he wanted. And my parents and Emma had been so blinded by his wealth and status that they'd let him do it. "You know what?" I said, picking up my documents and walking toward the door. "Keep the money." They all stared at me in shock. "I'm sorry, what?" My mom asked. "Keep it," I said. "Keep the money, keep the investments, keep your precious partnership in Jake's family business." "I don't understand," Emma said. "Because," I said, turning back to face them all, "I just figured out something much more valuable than $50,000. "What's that?" Jake asked, and I could see the wariness in his eyes. "I figured out who you really are," I said. "And now I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." His face went pale. "You see," I continued, "while I was gathering evidence about the trust fund, I did some research on your family's business. Very interesting reading. The silence in the room was deafening. Turns out, requiring girlfriends to make financial investments to prove their commitment is kind of a pattern for your family, isn't it, Jake? Almost like a business model. Emma looked confused. What are you talking about? But Jake knew exactly what I was talking about. I could see it in his eyes. Your brother's wife had to invest $20,000 when they got engaged. Your cousin's girlfriend invested $35,000. All of them buying their way into the family with their own money or money from their families. It's not like that, Jake stammered, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your family has a very profitable system. Find wealthy girls or girls from families with money, get them to invest their savings or inheritances into the family business, and then what? What happens if they ever want to leave, Jake? His silence was answer enough. They can't, can they? Because all their money is tied up in your family's company. They can't leave because they'd lose everything. Emma was staring at Jake now, and I could see understanding starting to dawn in her eyes. That's not true, she said, but her voice sounded uncertain. Ask him, I said. Ask him what happens to your investment if you two break up. Ask him if you can get your money back if you decide this isn't the life you want. Emma turned to Jake, waiting for him to deny it. To tell her I was wrong. Instead, he said, "That's not going to be an issue because we're not going to break up." Not a denial. Not a reassurance that she could get her money back. Just a statement that it wouldn't matter because they'd never split up. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. "Amber's right, isn't she? This is all you're just—" "I love you," Jake said desperately. "Emma, I love you. The business stuff, that's just family tradition. It's about commitment, about showing that you're serious about being part of the family." "With my sister's stolen inheritance," Emma said, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "With an investment that will benefit all of us," Jake corrected. But it was too late. Emma was finally seeing what I'd seen. The manipulation, the calculation, the way Jake had orchestrated everything to get what he wanted. "I need you to leave," Emma said quietly. "Emma, please," Jake started. "Get out," she screamed, and it was the first real emotion I'd seen from her in years. Jake looked around the room, probably hoping my parents would back him up. But even they looked shaken by what they were realizing about their golden boy. "This isn't over," Jake said, looking at me with pure hatred. "Yeah," I said, "it really is." After he left, the kitchen fell into stunned silence. Emma was crying quietly. My parents looked like they'd aged 10 years, and I felt empty. Not satisfied. Not vindicated. Just empty. Because even though I'd exposed Jake for what he was, even though I'd saved Emma from making the biggest mistake of her life, I'd still lost my family. They'd still chosen money and status over me. They'd still been willing to sacrifice my future for what they thought was Emma's. "What happens now?" my mom asked finally. "Now," I said, "you figure out how to get Emma's money back from Jake's family, and you learn to live with what you've done to me." "Amber," Emma said, her voice thick with tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I mean, I suspected something wasn't right, but I didn't want to think about it too hard because I liked having everything paid for. I was selfish and horrible, and I'm sorry. It was the first real apology I'd ever gotten from any of them. But it felt too little. Too late." "I know you are," I said. "But sorry doesn't give me back the 4 years I could have been in college. Sorry doesn't give me back the opportunities I never knew existed. Sorry doesn't give me back the family I thought I had. What can we do?" my dad asked. "How do we fix this?" I looked around the kitchen where I'd eaten thousands of meals, where I'd done homework at the counter, where I'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and all the moments that make up a childhood. "I don't know if you can," I said honestly. And then I walked out of that house for what I thought would be the last time. But I was wrong. Because 3 days later, something happened that would bring me back to face them one more time. Something that would reveal the biggest secret of all. Something that would change everything. The call came at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. 3 days after I'd walked out of my family's house for what I thought was the final time. Marcus and I were watching a movie on our couch, finally starting to feel like we could move forward with our lives. When my phone rang, it was Emma. "Amber," she said, her voice shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "You need to come over now." "Emma, it's 11 o'clock at night. Whatever this is about—" "I found something," she interrupted. "About Jake, about his family, about everything. And God, Amber, it's so much worse than we thought." Something in her voice made my blood run cold. This wasn't about apologies or making amends. This was pure terror. "What did you find?" "I can't tell you over the phone." "But you need to see this. We all need to see this. I've called Mom and Dad, too. They're on their way over." I looked at Marcus, who had paused the movie and was watching me with concern. "Emma, I don't think— He wasn't just after the money, Amber," she said, her voice breaking. "The money was never the real target. We were. And that's when I knew I had to go back." 20 minutes later, I was standing in my parents' living room for the third time in a month, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. There was no anger, no defensive posturing, no one trying to justify what they'd done. There was just fear. Emma was sitting at the dining room table with her laptop open, surrounded by printouts and documents. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. My parents sat across from her looking like they'd seen a ghost. "What did you find?" I asked, sitting down beside Emma. She turned the laptop toward me, and what I saw on the screen made my stomach drop. It was a forum. Some kind of private discussion board with usernames I didn't recognize, talking about things that made my skin crawl. "It's called the Investment Club," Emma said, her voice hollow. "It's a private forum for Jake's family and their associates. They share strategies for what they call asset acquisition through romantic partnerships." I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was reading. Posts about target identification, family financial assessment, extraction timelines, and long-term yield. Maximization. They were talking about people, like they were business opportunities. "How— Did you find this?" I asked. "Jake left his laptop here yesterday when I threw him out," Emma said. "I was going to return it, but then I thought, maybe I should look. See if there was anything about the money, about his family's business practices." She clicked to another thread, and I saw Jake's username, Jake Investor 47. "He's been documenting everything," Emma whispered. "Our entire relationship, our family's finances, our weaknesses, our assets. It's all here." She scrolled down to a post dated 6 months ago. Jake Investor 47. Target family assessment complete. Primary asset, Emma. Pre-med, compliant, desperate for approval. Secondary asset, sister Amber. Working class, trust fund, potential obstacle but manageable. Parents are status-focused, will sacrifice secondary asset to protect primary. Recommend standard extraction protocol with modification for sister elimination. Sister elimination? I felt like I was going to be sick. "There's more," Emma said, clicking to another post. This one was from 8 months ago. Jake Investor 47. Initial relationship investment paying off. Emma fully committed. Parents see me as ideal son-in-law. Discovered sister has inheritance. 50K trust fund parents are hiding from her. Opportunity. Convince parents to redirect sister's fund to Emma's education, then use for buy-in investment. Sister will never know what she lost. He planned it all, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. From the beginning. Meeting you, dating you, getting close to our family, it was all to get to our money. It gets worse, Emma said, and I didn't think it was possible for my stomach to sink any further. She clicked to a more recent post. From just last week, Jake Investor 47. Complication, sister discovered trust fund theft. Confronted family yesterday with evidence. Recommend immediate damage control. Sister must be discredited before she can cause legal problems. Have identified pressure points. Boyfriend Marcus, criminal background check in progress. Employment records, minor violations documented. Personal history, Psychological profile suggests emotional instability. If necessary, we'll implement full isolation protocol. Criminal background check, I said. Marcus doesn't have a criminal record. Keep reading, Emma said grimly. The next post made my blood freeze. Jake Investor 47, Marcus Williams background check complete. Clean record, but identified financial pressure point. Mother's medical debt, $23,000. Also discovered sister Jenny, age 16 college fund shortfall. Recommend approach through family financial stress. Alternative, anonymous tip to IRS regarding unreported income from side jobs. They were going to destroy Marcus's family to get to me. There's more, Emma said, scrolling to the most recent post from yesterday. Jake Investor 47. Target Emma becoming suspicious after sister confrontation. Relationship status uncertain. Initiating containment protocol. Have contacted Uncle Jim, family financial manager, regarding insurance policy on all trust fund documentation. If Emma attempts to recover invested funds, evidence of original theft may disappear permanently. Uncle Jim, they'd gotten to Uncle Jim. They're going to destroy the evidence, my dad said, his voice hollow. If we try to get Emma's money back, they'll make it look like the trust fund never existed. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the scope of what Jake's family had done. This wasn't just theft. This was a systematic operation designed to identify families with assets, infiltrate them through romantic relationships, extract their wealth, and then eliminate any threats to their operation. And we'd walked right into it. How many families have they done this to? I asked. Emma clicked to another section of the forum. 23 that I can count. Going back 5 years, 23 families destroyed. 23 daughters manipulated, isolated, and financially trapped. 23 sets of parents convinced to sacrifice one child for another. We have to go to the police, my mom said. With what evidence? Emma asked. This is a private forum. Jake could claim it's fiction, role-playing, anything. And if Uncle Jim has destroyed the trust fund documents, we'll have nothing, I finished. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our situation settling over us. Jake's family had spent years perfecting this system. They knew exactly how to manipulate families, how to cover their tracks, how to eliminate threats. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed I was the weak link. They'd assumed I could be eliminated, discredited, or scared into silence. They were wrong. I have an idea, I said slowly, but you're all going to have to trust me. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a police station with Detective Sarah Martinez, laying out the most insane story I'd ever told. Fraud, manipulation, organized financial crimes targeting families through romantic relationships. I'd expected her to think I was crazy. Instead, she leaned forward with interest. How many families did you say? She asked. 23 that we could identify. Probably more, she made a note. And they document everything on this private forum? Everything. Names, financial details, manipulation strategies, extraction timelines. Mr. Williams, she said, turning to Marcus, who'd insisted on coming with me. You said you've been targeted for harassment? Anonymous calls to my work claiming I'm stealing from customers. Someone called the IRS claiming I'm not reporting income from side jobs I don't even do. And yesterday, someone tried to break into my truck. Detective Martinez nodded. Classic intimidation tactics. They want to isolate Ms. Carter by destroying your life. Can you do anything about it? I asked. Actually, yes. We've been investigating Jake's family business for months on an unrelated matter. Securities fraud. But we haven't been able to build a solid case because their operation is so sophisticated. She smiled for the first time since we'd started talking. But what you've brought me, this forum, these documented strategies, the pattern of targeting multiple families, this is exactly what we needed. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we set a trap. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Emma would reach out to Jake, tell him she wanted to reconcile. She'd claim that she was willing to overlook everything if they could just move forward together. She'd suggest meeting at a neutral location, a restaurant where the police could monitor everything. Meanwhile, I would play the role they expected me to play. the angry, desperate sister trying to cause problems for their perfect relationship. I'd show up at the restaurant, make a scene, threaten to go to the police if Emma didn't listen to reason. Jake would be forced to react, to defend himself, to explain why I was lying. And hopefully, he'd reveal enough information to give the police what they needed for warrants, searches, and arrests. It was risky. If Jake suspected it was a setup, he could disappear, destroy evidence, warn his family. But it was our only shot at justice. The meeting was set for Friday night at an upscale restaurant downtown. Emma had chosen it carefully, public enough that Jake wouldn't suspect a trap, but with enough privacy that he'd feel comfortable talking freely. I spent the week preparing, working with Detective Martinez to plan exactly what I would say, how I would provoke Jake into revealing information. I practiced my angry sister routine, rehearsed my accusations, memorized the key points that would get him talking. But nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened that night. Emma was already seated when I arrived, looking nervous but determined. Jake was across from her, looking smug and confident in his expensive suit. He probably thought he'd won, that Emma had come crawling back, that everything was going according to plan. I walked up to their table, playing my role perfectly. "Emma, what the hell are you doing?" I said loudly enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "After everything we found out about him, you're really going to take him back?" "Amber, please," Emma said right on script. "This is between Jake and me." "Like hell it is," I shot back. "He stole my money, he manipulated our family, and you're just going to pretend none of that happened?" Jake stood up, his face a mask of calm concern. "Amber, I understand you're upset, but you're causing a scene." "I don't care if I'm causing a scene. You destroyed my family." "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Jake said smoothly. "The trust fund situation was handled legally, through proper channels. Your family made a decision about how to allocate resources, and I simply provided advice." "Advice?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean manipulation. You targeted Emma from the beginning. You researched our family's finances. You identified our weaknesses, and you exploited them." "That's a very serious accusation," Jake said, but I could see something shifting in his expression, a hint of concern. "It's not an accusation. It's a fact. I know about the forum, Jake. I know about the investment club. I know about all the other families you've destroyed." That got his attention. His calm facade cracked, just for a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Jake Investor 47, I said. 23 families? Asset acquisition through romantic partnerships, sister elimination protocols." Jake's face went pale. He sat down heavily, looking around the restaurant like he was calculating escape routes. "You hacked into private communications," he said finally. "That's illegal." "What's illegal is fraud," I said. "What's illegal is organized financial crimes. What's illegal is systematically targeting families to steal their money." "You can't prove anything," Jake said. But he sounded desperate now. "Actually, we can." That's when Detective Martinez appeared at our table. Badge in hand. "Jake Morrison," she said formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, organized financial crimes, and racketeering." The look of shock on Jake's face was worth everything we'd been through. He turned to Emma, probably expecting her to defend him, to claim this was all a misunderstanding. Instead, Emma looked him straight in the eye and said, "I hope you rot in jail." As the detective cuffed Jake and read him his rights, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace, not satisfaction, not revenge. Just peace. The knowledge that finally justice was being served, but the story wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, I was back in that same police station, this time for a very different reason. Detective Martinez had called to update us on the investigation. "We've seized computers, financial records, and communications from Jake's entire family operation," she said. "What we've found is extensive." She laid out photographs and documents on the table in front of us. 37 families targeted over the past 7 years. Nearly $2 million in fraudulent investments, and that's just what we can prove so far. What about our money? Emma asked. Your $50,000 plus interest and penalties will be returned as soon as we can liquidate their assets. The court has frozen all of their accounts. I stared at the documents, trying to process the scope of what Jake's family had done. Dozens of families destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen. Years of systematic manipulation and abuse. What happens to Jake? Marcus asked. He's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison, Detective Martinez said. His father and uncle are facing similar charges. The whole operation is finished. 15 to 20 years. It seemed like justice, but it also felt inadequate somehow. How do you punish someone for destroying families? For stealing people's futures? For the emotional damage that can never be quantified or repaired? But as we left the police station that day, I realized something important. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's also about healing. It's about truth. It's about making sure the people who were hurt finally get acknowledgement that what happened to them was wrong. And maybe, sometimes, it's about giving broken families a chance to rebuild. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop with Emma, both of us nursing lattes and catching up on our lives. It had taken months of therapy, honest conversations, and painful apologies, but we were slowly rebuilding our relationship. I got into the nursing program at the community college, Emma said. It's not as prestigious as med school, but I think I'll actually be happier. Good for you, I said, and I meant it. How are you paying for it? The money we got back from Jake's family. Turns out $50,000 goes a lot further at community college than at that fancy private university. I smiled. And Mom and Dad? Emma's expression grew more serious. They're trying. Dad started going to therapy. Mom's been volunteering at a financial literacy program, helping families avoid scams. I think they're really trying to understand what they did wrong. That's good, I said. What about you? Emma asked. Have you thought about maybe giving them another chance? I considered the question. For months, I'd been angry. Furious at the betrayal, the lies, the years of being treated like I was worth less than Emma. But anger is exhausting. And at some point, you have to decide whether you want to spend your life being bitter about the past or building something better for the future. Maybe, I said. Someday, when I'm ready. They miss you, Emma said quietly. We all miss you. I miss you too, I admitted. But missing someone and trusting them again are two different things. Emma nodded. I understand. And, Amber? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything. For being selfish. For not questioning where the money came from. For treating you like you were worth less than me. You deserved better from all of us. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two sisters who'd been torn apart by manipulation and greed, slowly finding their way back to each other. You know what's funny? Emma said eventually. What? Jake always said you were the weak link. The one who could be eliminated. But in the end, you're the one who brought him down. I thought about that. About how Jake had underestimated me. How he'd assumed that being working class meant being powerless. How he'd thought that not having a college degree meant not having intelligence or strength or the ability to fight back. Maybe that's the real lesson in all of this, I said. People who judge your worth by your bank account or your job title or your social status usually end up underestimating what you're capable of. Emma smiled. Marcus is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him too. And I was. Marcus had stood by me through everything. The family drama, the police investigation, the media attention when Jake's arrest made the local news. He'd never made me feel like my family's dysfunction was a burden or an embarrassment. He'd just loved me, supported me, and helped me fight for justice. The next week, Marcus and I went house hunting. Not for anything fancy, just a little place we could call our own. Somewhere we could build a life together, free from other people's expectations and manipulations. With my share of the recovered money, plus the additional restitution the court ordered, we had options I'd never dreamed of. I could go back to school if I wanted. Marcus could open his own garage. We could travel, invest, save for our future. But more importantly, we had something Jake's money could never buy. A relationship built on honesty, respect, and genuine love. As we walked through a small house with a big backyard and old hardwood floors, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The betrayal, the theft, the lies, but also the truth, the justice, and the hard-won wisdom that came from surviving something that could have destroyed me. "What do you think?" Marcus asked, standing in what would be our kitchen. I looked around the space. Not perfect, but ours. A place where we could make dinner together, host friends, maybe someday teach our kids to cook. "I think," I said, "it's perfect. Because here's what I learned from this whole nightmare. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love you, support you, and fight for you when things get tough. It's about the people who see your worth even when others don't. Sometimes the family that hurts you the most isn't the one you're born into. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to build a new family with people who actually deserve your love." 3 months later, we signed the papers on our little house. My parents came to the closing, awkward but trying, offering to help us move. Emma brought lunch and spent the day unpacking boxes with us, laughing and sharing stories like we used to when we were kids. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still unhealed wounds, still conversations we needed to have, but it was a beginning. And as I stood in our new living room that evening, surrounded by boxes and surrounded by people who loved me, Marcus, Emma, even my parents trying their best to rebuild what they'd broken, I realized something important. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's also about healing. It's about truth. It's about making sure the people who were hurt finally get acknowledgement that what happened to them was wrong. And maybe, sometimes it's about giving broken families a chance to rebuild. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop with Emma, both of us nursing lattes and catching up on our lives. It had taken months of therapy, honest conversations, and painful apologies, but we were slowly rebuilding our relationship. "I got into the nursing program at the community college," Emma said. "It's not as prestigious as med school, but I think I'll actually be happier." "Good for you," I said, and I meant it. "How are you paying for it?" "The money we got back from Jake's family. Turns out $50,000 goes a lot further at community college than at that fancy private university." I smiled. "And Mom and Dad?" Emma's expression grew more serious. "They're trying. Dad started going to therapy. Mom's been volunteering at a financial literacy program, helping families avoid scams. I think they're really trying to understand what they did wrong." "That's good," I said. "What about you?" Emma asked. "Have you thought about maybe giving them another chance?" I considered the question. For months I'd been angry, furious at the betrayal, the lies, the years of being treated like I was worth less than Emma. But anger is exhausting. And at some point, you have to decide whether you want to spend your life being bitter about the past or building something better for the future. "Maybe," I said, "someday, when I'm ready." "They miss you," Emma said quietly. "We all miss you." "I miss you too," I admitted. "But missing someone and trusting them again are two different things." Emma nodded. "I understand. And, Amber? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything. For being selfish. For not questioning where the money came from. For treating you like you were worth less than me. You deserved better from all of us." "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two sisters who'd been torn apart by manipulation and greed, slowly finding their way back to each other. "You know what's funny?" Emma said eventually. "What?" "Jake always said you were the weak link, the one who could be eliminated. But in the end, you're the one who brought him down." I thought about that. About how Jake had underestimated me, how he'd assumed that being working class meant being powerless. How he'd thought that not having a college degree meant not having intelligence or strength or the ability to fight back. "Maybe that's the real lesson in all of this," I said. "People who judge your worth by your bank account or your job title or your social status usually end up underestimating what you're capable of." Emma smiled. "Marcus is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him too." And I was. Marcus had stood by me through everything. The family drama, the police investigation, the media attention when Jake's arrest made the local news. He'd never made me feel like my family's dysfunction was a burden or an embarrassment. He'd just loved me, supported me, and helped me fight for justice. The next week, Marcus and I went house hunting. Not for anything fancy, just a little place we could call our own. Somewhere we could build a life together, free from other people's expectations and manipulations. With my share of the recovered money, plus the additional restitution the court ordered, we had options I'd never dreamed of. I could go back to school if I wanted. Marcus could open his own garage. We could travel, invest, save for our future. But more importantly, we had something Jake's money could never buy. A relationship built on honesty, respect, and genuine love. As we walked through a small house with a big backyard and old hardwood floors, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The betrayal, the theft, the lies, but also the truth, the justice, and the hard-won wisdom that came from surviving something that could have destroyed me. "What do you think?" Marcus asked, standing in what would be our kitchen. I looked around the space. Not perfect, but ours. A place where we could make dinner together, host friends, maybe someday teach our kids to cook. "I think," I said, "it's perfect." Because here's what I learned from this whole nightmare. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love you, support you, and fight for you when things get tough. It's about the people who see your worth even when others don't. Sometimes the family that hurts you the most isn't the one you're born into. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to build a new family with people who actually deserve your love. 3 months later, we signed the papers on our little house. My parents came to the closing, awkward but trying, offering to help us move. Emma brought lunch and spent the day unpacking boxes with us, laughing and sharing stories like we used to when we were kids. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still unhealed wounds, still conversations we needed to have. But it was a beginning. And as I stood in our new living room that evening, surrounded by boxes and surrounded by people who loved me, Marcus, Emma, even my parents trying their best to rebuild what they'd broken, I realized something important. Jake had tried to destroy my family to get what he wanted. But in the end, all he'd really done was help us figure out what we actually meant to each other. The money he stole had been returned with interest. The lies he told had been exposed. The manipulation he used had been revealed for what it was. But the strength I'd found in fighting back, the courage I'd discovered in demanding justice, the love I'd built with Marcus, those things were mine. Those things were real. And those things were worth more than any trust fund could ever be. 6 months later, Jake was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. His father got 25 years. Their entire operation was dismantled, their assets liquidated to compensate their victims. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to see Jake in handcuffs or hear him apologize. I'd already gotten what I needed from him, the truth. Instead, that day, I was at home with Marcus, painting our bedroom a soft blue color we'd chosen together, building something beautiful in the house we'd bought with the money Jake had tried to steal. And when the phone rang to tell me about the sentence, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just gratitude that it was over, and hope for everything that was just beginning. That's my story. The story of how my parents told me to move out on Christmas morning, how I was already packed, and how that terrible day ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. Because sometimes, when people show you who they really are, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is believe them. And sometimes when they try to throw you away, you discover that you were never trash in the first place. You were treasure. You just needed to find people who could recognize your worth. And if you're watching this and you're dealing with family members who make you feel like you're not enough, who treat you like a burden, who make you question your own value, please know that their treatment of you says everything about them and nothing about you. You are worth fighting for. You are worth loving. You are worth so much more than the people who can't see it. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And please, if this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Share your own story. Let's support each other, because that's what real family does.